Brad,
Welcome.
take it away.
Okay, welcome. My name is Brett Pomerantz. I'm a member of the Board of Governors of the Religion Communicators Council. I'm also a host and executive vice president at Jewish Life Television, and it is my honor to be moderating today's panel, which will include live elements with our guest today, but also will be seen later on YouTube and otherwise. So I want to remind us what we were discussing today. And when we think about what we do as religious communicators, the concept of servant leadership is closely tied, or can be closely tied, to how we tell stories and shape our messages. When we lead as servants, our communication becomes less about promoting ourselves or our organizations and more about amplifying the voices of others. We can choose words, images, and strategies that honor the dignity of our audience and help others see their role in the wider work of healing and hope. So, in this seminar, I hope that we can explore that concept of servant leadership and offer us practical ways to integrate its principles into our communications. And to help us do that, it is my honor to introduce our guest, Pamela Gilchrist. Pam is a Fortune 100 leadership and marketing communications expert. She is the chief strategist at the Gilchrist Group, a business consulting and marketing communications firm founded in 1999, and she works during times of growth and change to optimize outcomes. Based on emotional intelligence, the science of behavioral communication underpins her work to improve impact and make changes stick. She holds universal accreditation in public relations. She's a member of the PSRA Counselors Academy and past president of the National Speakers Association Ohio. She received her bachelor's in communications from Western Michigan and her master's in journalism from The Ohio State University, as they say. Pam, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, we were just talking the difference between OU and OSU, and
Right.
you're right. They did put the in there for Ohio State. So I think just to cause a little separation, but Jenny and I were just comparing notes, and I know Jenny has had a stellar education as well at Ohio U, who has a really storied journalism program also. So we're friends through PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America, which is how we met just yesterday, right, Jenny?
Well, sort of.
So it is my honor and pleasure to share with you this afternoon a little bit about servant leadership and the secret sauce that
So,
goes into that.
so what's servant leadership? Let's just start with the most basic question. What is servant leadership?
It is not being self-focused, as you just mentioned to us. It is
Mm.
what can I do to pour out and to share with others, to put others first, to consider them, to consider the stakeholders of your organization and your community at large, and figure out, is there a way for me to care, offer kindness, and give back or pay it forward?
So, how does that manifest when we think about faith based communications? Especially since so much of what we do, we have deadlines and priorities and limited resources. So, let's focus on kind of the broadly spoken faith based communities.
Yeah, I think the two go hand in hand, right? Because if you are a faith-based community, you're there with a mission of service and a mission of hope and a mission of kindness. So it is always with those organizations. It's interesting. I'm going to back up. It's always about that, but also I'm doing some leadership work right now with my church that I serve at. And we're also looking at discipleship. So, how are you building up others within your organization so that they are equipped to go out and serve others, each other, and out in the community?
But what's so interesting about faith based organizations, historically for sure, and somewhat modern day, is this kind of top down concept. It's the person on the pulpit, it's the deacon, it's the rabbi, it's the priest, it's the pastor, it's the preacher. And so, how does that manifest when you're looking at servant leadership, servant communication, when you think about this concept of top down?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fascinating question that you just asked me because the organizational work that I'm doing right now with my particular church, we were looking at those organizational models and how do you ensure that even if you have, um, I'm going to say a strong leader model versus a kind of um, membership model. How do
Hmm.
you bring that all together? And so the way that they've chosen to do it is through shepherding and having certain elders come over different areas of the ministry to help shepherd and grow and link everything together. So, with the size of that organization, it's not like we can really get away from a strong leader model, but at the same time, it's all encompassing. Um, it's very equal in terms of the different ministries, the different disciplines, and how it is being organized to grow and support.
Now, we can look at an individual parish, synagogue, church, but many of us work for national organizations, international organizations. I know Andres works for an international organization with the LDS faith. I mean, there's no question that, when you're dealing with so many people, how do you engage in that kind of not talking about yourself and your organization? And then I want to get to your slides because I know you have like a nice formal presentation, but I want to
Yeah.
set that up.
So your question is how do, say it one more time, how do
Yeah,
we
no,
go?
it's basically, I mean, look, if you're at a single church,
Yeah.
like your parish in northern Kentucky, it's easy to kind of look outward and think about the flock, I guess you're saying. And because you know who you're speaking to. It's not about yourself, it's about specific people. But Andres is working for the LDS Church, with millions of adherents. So, how does Andres adopt servant based leadership, or I adopt servant based leadership, or communication, when we're speaking to millions and not hundreds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just goes back to the core principles of communication, of understanding your stakeholder groups, and how are you communicating and connecting and serving each of those groups. With us as communicators, it's important to make sure we're touching and influencing and reaching all of the different stakeholder groups. And they're not monolithic, as you all know, right?
Sure.
So you need to,
Can I interrupt? There's an expression that many
yeah,
Jews will say, 'cause I'm Jewish: two Jews, three opinions.
I love it.
So,
Yes,
you can use that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, and inviting feedback, and that's some of what I'll talk about today a little
Yeah,
bit.
so let's do it.
Is
We
yeah.
set this up beautifully. Take it away, Pam. We'd love to see your presentation.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I'm sharing with you here, speaking of every day you have an opportunity to give something to someone else. So what you're seeing here is a photo of Truett Cathy and his wife Jeanette, who Truett is the founder of Chick-fil-A. And
Mm.
so there's some little Truett-isms that I might weave in here as we go along, but it was really his focus to serve others and make life better and easier for them, which is kind of why he founded the restaurant. He had a little diner, if you will, kind of down the street from a plant, a Ford plant, I believe. And he knew that they had a limited amount of time to get in and get out, get something to eat, and get back on the line for their shift. And making the meals that he was making just was not cutting it for the quantity that was needed in a timely fashion. So he actually invented the chicken sandwich in the pressure that you see today. And he did that as a way to be able to serve them a nice hot meal, take care of them, and then be able to get them back to where they needed to work. So that's just a little history for you that you may not have known.
I love that.
So what does servant leadership looks like? Um, I share this story because this lady is very, very, very near and dear to my heart. This is Rose Wood. Um, Rose Wood, who just recently retired in her early 80s, mind you, from the Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Airport. And those of you who were at that conference, you're all laughing and saying the
Right.
Cincinnati Airport is over in Northern Kentucky. Um, Rose is probably one of the most joyful people I have ever met in my entire life. And I have known her for over 30 years. Due to a car crash, the attorneys don't like me to say car accident, they like me to say car crash. I have some limited mobility. So when I travel, I do need a wheelchair at the airport. And so Rose would frequently be the lovely person that would greet me late at night when I was the last flight coming in from a work trip and help me make sure that I got from my plane to baggage claim and get my bags and get taken care of. And Rose is probably about 4'11",
I love
probably
it.
weighs 90 pounds dripping wet. And Rose can single-handedly manage three different wheelchairs at a time and get us on the train and get us moving, and all with a smile on her face, and one of the most joyful people that I have ever met. And she loved her job, she loved serving, and she loved working at the airport. So I just share that with you as, one example of what a servant leadership person can look like. And this is what I affectionately call the trash man. Now, he's not just any trash man. Um, this is Doug Peters. When I met Doug Peters, he was out in the parking lot of his Chick-fil-A restaurant picking up trash from the bushes, from under cars, straw wrappers, whatever debris somebody might leave around, making sure that everything was nice and clean and tidy. And Doug is not only one of the Chick-fil-A operators, and each restaurant is individually owned and operated. So there's no corporate owned restaurants. Each is an individual business owner. And Doug also happens to serve as my leader for the market work that I do for Chick-fil-A in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. But when I think of a servant leader, I think of Doug because he is meticulous in the details of making sure everything is fantastic and that his guests have a fantastic experience at their restaurant. Servant leadership to me also looks like, and this is down at the Dwarf House, which is the original restaurant that Truett Cathy had before he opened other Chick-fil-A's. And sitting there next to the bronze statue is Dustin DeShera in the blue shirt and Evan Hodges, who is one of his young employees in the jacket there. And Dustin is a very intentional operator, very focused on being a servant leader and taking a young person like Evan, understanding his talent, watching him grow, developing his skills, letting him try new things from just starting, front of house, as they call it in the restaurant, serve the drinks, hand out the orders, take the orders, to doing some social media and marketing. Evan eventually left our local nest here and went down to Chick-fil-A corporate and was working with them on their tours and hospitality that they had at the corporate office. And then he was looking to make a change. And so looked at a lot of organizations. And I said to him, I said, what's the fit? Some of these are just not, he's a very expressive person, a very vivacious person, very charismatic person with a lot of energy. And he was looking at some banking and different things like that. And, I said to him, I said, Evan, that might not be the best opportunity for you. So he actually just recently landed an opportunity at GE Aerospace here in Cincinnati, where he is the right-hand person for a division leader. And the division leader admits, I've never had anybody support me before. I'm a little ADD. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you to be the person that, brings order to my life. And so Evan is doing that in serving in a servant leadership capacity for a business unit leader who is moving really, really fast and helping to make the parts that make airplanes fly. So, leading by example and engagement, what does that mean? It's about creating a strong culture. And I look at that with four kind of bullet points. So, enthusiasm. Are you enthusiastic about what you're doing and how you're engaging? Are you encouraging others, just as Dustin was encouraging Evan to explore, to develop, to try new things? And are you leading by example? And then are you engaging? So again, not being in your bubble, not being just top down, but what are you doing to share, relate, uh, incorporate, and collaborate with all of the team members? So it begins with what I call the decision to be different, right? So what are the traits of a phenomenal leader? I've put a list up here and I don't have to go through them all, but there is a list of some P words and a list of some C words that I thought might just help us kind of wrap our arms around what this means and mostly be present, right? Are you distracted? Are you focused on other things? Are you not in the moment and being present for the people that you are interacting with and with your stakeholders? Are you positive? I say we all have a choice every day of how we show up and how we choose to interact. You can choose to be grumpy, or you can choose to bring a positive attitude to everything that you're doing. And that goes right along with your character and credibility. Competence is probably a given for any of us in these roles, but it doesn't mean you have to be caring. So, can you be competent and can you be caring? And I'm going to share a little bit later on about some of those traits from leadership author and speaker Patrick Lencioni, who's done just some fabulous work, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and some other things like that that just really help your organization get things going in the right direction. So if we had a couple of little take-home nuggets for this, think about how are you leading by example? Are you willing to be authentic and transparent? There's a risk and there's a benefit to that. And I have found that those leaders that are more authentic and willing to be more transparent receive a greater reward, greater team engagement, and better results for doing that by engaging with others. And then think for yourself, do you struggle with any of this? And are there changes that you can make as you're looking at how you're engaging as a servant leader? I'm going to switch gears for a minute here and talk a little bit about self-care and self-acceptance because if you can't serve from an empty cup, right? We've all heard that expression. And so, what are you doing to take care of yourself? I said to Jenny, I said, I am sporting my zebra top today because we are coming to a close of the month of May, which is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome Awareness Month. And that is a condition of a connective tissue disorder. It's considered a rare disease, if you will. So I am one of those people that has this rare condition, and that means that you need to look at life differently. And they always say to the doctors, sometimes when you hear hoofbeats, it's really a zebra. The doctor is trained to say, oh, it's a horse. It's just a horse. Look at the horse. And then along comes this zebra, this unique creature, and no two are exactly alike. And they all have different stripes and different patterns through this Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I'll talk a little bit more about what I say, the me you don't see, and are you willing to be transparent? I hid for a long time, you guys, because I was in a Fortune 50, not 500, but Fortune 50 corporate role. And first of all, we didn't know exactly what was wrong with me at that time. But secondly, there's a performance that has to happen, right? When you're dealing with the executive group, and there's certain expectations and things that go along with that. And to not be seen less than or less capable, I hid what was going on with me for a long, long time. And it's only been in the last maybe 5 or 10 years that I've worked to kind of integrate that into who I am, what I am, and how I present myself to the world. So I'm happy, like toward the end, to answer more questions about that. But with that comes an element of self-care and acceptance, right? The first part is acceptance, and then how are you taking care of yourself? And for me, that means making special adjustments to my schedule and my wellness routine and my health and all of those things so that I can keep going and have a positive impact on the world around me. So when you look at your self-care pie chart, are you doing what you love? Think about that. Do you have time for prayer and meditation? Are you eating healthy? And I admit I'm not as good as that at that as I would like to be. Are you reflecting on your thoughts and emotions? Are you getting out for some fresh air and moving your body? And are you getting enough sleep? And I'll say for one, I am in the sleep deprived category. I stay up way too late, like the cat over on the right, maybe doom scrolling or, surfing or doing different things like that. So just kind of take a look at the chart and make some notes for yourself about where you're at with your self-care and what you might make changes in to improve and do a little bit differently. So when you're leading self to better serve others, you've got to first serve yourself. So to know and understand yourself, keep those priorities in focus. Focus on lifelong learning. Are you doing things that are learning, just like today, being part of this webinar, to stay on top of everything, to increase your opportunity for impact? Um, my grandfather always had a saying, back in the day of keep your gas tank half full. And that was really because I lived in Michigan and there were storms and you don't want to be out and be stuck somewhere and, run out of gas in a snowbank. That's kind of the worst of all worlds. So he would always say, keep your tank half full. And I would ask you all as leaders, are you doing that? And are you able to do that? If not, are there some changes that you need to make so that you're not running on empty and you have the ability to serve others? I'd also suggest look at your first and last 60. So how are you spending the first 60 minutes of your day and the final 60 minutes of your day? Is it frantic? Is it, the alarm goes off and you're scrolling and looking at emails and trying to figure out what's going on and what I have to tackle first? Or are you taking it in a slower, more methodical, meditative way? And the last 60, same thing. Is it rushing to deadlines? Or are you using that time to strategically focus on where you could have the highest impact for tomorrow? So chart your course, be humble, be nimble, and be flexible. The Wind Shape Foundation, which is part of the foundation that Truett Cathy with Chick-fil-A created, has some tips on leading self. And I had to put this little picture in just because I love it. I am also a musician, as we were talking about before we were coming on the webinar. And so this is at one of the high schools in town where I had a chance to take my big bovine friend there, the Chick-fil-A cow, and do some fun things in the theater with him. So the WindShape Foundation looks at things like what areas of your life need some attention due to tension. So is there physical, mental, soul, or spiritual tension that you might need to address? And they also have some great trips and camps and different retreats available for adults. So it might be something if you guys need a little getaway that you might want to just go check that out at some point. So God created us to be whole, not compartmentalized people. And I think in today's, society with the we've got digital things right at our fingertips every 2 seconds, right? So how do we kind of step back from that and become a whole person and focus on that? Um, there's the old saying that time heals all wounds, and I'm not sure it does. I think that takes self work and reflection and forgiveness of self and others to help you move past that. So the self lies, I spoke into that a little bit with, my health and my condition and, saying I'm fine. I still say to everyone, I'm fine, I'm okay, I don't need anything. But that's a bunch of BS, honestly. And those that know me know that it's really a bunch of BS. So, are you being real with yourself? And are you nourishing yourself and thriving and have a daily intentional purpose? And that goes back to your first 60, right? So, are you waking up and just diving in? Are you taking that moment to think about? And at the end of the previous day, what is my intentional focus going to be for that next day? So a couple resources, and I'll share this slide out with you guys that I really like. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Some of you might be familiar with that book, Proven Easy Ways to Build Good Habits and Break Your Bad Ones. In terms of self-help, Boundaries and Safe People it's a really great pair of books that has some emotional healing work in it. And then Patrick Lencioni, his most recent work is The Six Types of Working Genius. And if you are leading a team or in a team, leading an organization, I would highly recommend this book and the assessment series that is offered. It really brings together probably about 40 years of his work into one package that you can do the assessment and then see how your team and group fit together and where your strengths are and are you in the right chair. And Lencioni admitted for a long time, he said, I'm trying to run the business, I'm trying to do all these things, and it's not my strength. I'm not good at it, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should be focused on my writing, my seminars, my presentations, things like that, not, the operations of the business. So finding out where you're good and where you can add value, and then putting the other people in the right seats on your bus so that you wind up with a high performance team. Also, my organization, we do offer Enneagram training. You might be familiar with the Enneagram. It is head, heart, gut personality styles, and there are 9 different styles. So I don't think that link works. I'll get you an updated link. But if you're interested in any of that, I've been a certified Enneagram trainer through Loyola University since about 2002. So I've been doing it for a minute. So your take-home nuggets for this section. How are you caring for self? Consider that. What are you doing to invest in yourself and learn and grow? Are you brave enough to be your authentic self with yourself and with others? And then how can you become more resilient? So think about 3 things that you could do better and differently. So when we look at impacting people, we've looked at ourselves, looking at impacting other people. I mentioned Dustin DeShera. He was the guy on the bench. Here he is having a little fun. So at times we need to have a little fun and get a little wild and crazy, like the Kool-Aid Man, right? So he is an operator with Chick-fil-A over in Northern Kentucky, and he was going through the process to be considered for a second location. And that does not happen very often in the Chick-fil-A world. Most operators have 1 location, and then if they are truly excellent, they might be considered for a second location. And it didn't work out for him the first time around. And that really sent him to a place where he had to do some self-reflection and try to figure out what's really true for him and what really, really mattered. And if you're in an organization for any length of time, you're running some kind of a budget and a spreadsheet and looking at the bottom line. And there's 2 ways to look at it, right? You have to do that. But he decided that he needed to put people over profits, and that if he focused on his people and people development, the rest of it would take care of itself. So he says humility should be a color and be woven into every part of who we are. So he shows inspiring care on day 1. He reinforces servant leadership to all of his team members. He leads with purpose, selects leaders differently based upon the people and kindness model, and uses a lot of peer feedback to grow his teams. And I'm pleased to say that there was another opportunity that came around for him after a few years and some growth and some focus and development. And he was rewarded with a different store opportunity in Northern Kentucky. So now he's one of those rare people who has 2 restaurants that he's managing and loving. But he had to really kind of take that moment and step back and figure out what matters, what's really, really important, and how do I want to be a leader and serve others in these organizations. So what's the SERVE model? It's an acronym, acrostic, I guess is the proper term. So the S is for see and shape the future. Can you see, and then what can you lean into to help shape the future. E, engage. Are you engaging and developing others along the way, or are you just kind of set it and forget it? The R is reinvent continuously. And I think we are all at a place with our organizations and in our careers that we're almost reinventing on a daily basis these days, just to keep up with the pace of change and everything that's going on. The V, value results and relationships. So you have to have that yin and yang of performance, yet focusing in on the human part of the business or the organization where you are serving. And then E, embody values. I'm sure you all represent an organization that has a set of core values and missional principles. And are you embodying those and truly living those out for others? So your take-home nuggets here are: what values and beliefs do you hold for guidance? Do you trust a higher power for direction? How are you leaning into the future, and can you help steer that ship at all? And then what reinvention do you envision needing in the next 18 to 24 months? And Jenny, you'll appreciate that. As communicators, you'll all appreciate this. I have been, I'm just going to say, a little bit AI resistant. I've been around a minute, and embracing all of that change um, at times can seem overwhelming. But I also recognize that if I'm going to be effective in what I do, it's something that I needed to embrace and take hold of. So changing for me and reinvention is becoming an AI certified marketing consultant over the next few months here. And, that's going to change what and how we do everything, whether we like it or not. So we can either lean into that and embrace these changes, understand how these tools work, and use the tools to forward our communication with our stakeholders. Or I think we can watch the world kind of pass us by. So encourage me along over the next few months as I'm going through this certification and learning how to add value to my clients with all of this. So leading others in teams. So Truett Cathy said, how do you know if someone needs encouragement? And the answer is if they're breathing. So everyone, every single day needs encouragement. Are you treating others with dignity and honor and respect? Are you bringing joy to your job? Back to Rose at the airport, who always had a smile on her face and was one of the most joyous people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Is it truly my pleasure, which is the Chick-fil-A phrase? If they take your order and they will say, instead of thank you, they'll say my pleasure, um, and mean it. Do you really mean it, or is it just words that you're saying? And if not, what am I missing? Is there a lens of perception that perhaps I'm not looking at or not considering? Is there a way that you see the world different than I that we need to be open about and have a conversation about? And are you willing to demonstrate doing the hard stuff? So there are things that might not be your favorite things to do, but are you willing to roll up your sleeves and say, I'm willing to step right beside you and do the hard stuff? And then what behavior is acceptable? So when we talk about teams and team communication and leading teams, there's high performing teams, and then there's kind of these dysfunctional teams. And if you want a bonus, I'll send you out my list of dysfunctional team behaviors that I have. I kind of took it out for time purposes, but here's a little graphic for you, a graphical representation that I really like. It is from the book, The Oz Principle. And I had a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around the Oz and the land of Oz and Dorothy and all that stuff in a business book. But it became very popular and there's a lot of training on it. But it all comes down to this graphic. So are you a victor or a victim? And this is a really easy graphical representation for you guys to get your arms around and then share with your leaders and your teams. So the victor is taking ownership, is being accountable, and is being responsible. The victim, on the other hand, is blaming others, making excuses, and in denial. And you see a lot of victim behavior, unfortunately, in organizations. And they tend to be the louder ones, maybe getting more attention. So helping your organizations focus on those positive attributes and not allowing the negative attributes to lead, and pull the dog around by the collar, if you will, in your organizations is super, super important. So what's a healthy team look like? There needs to be clear decision making and clearly communicated, a leader that balances a fair hearing with finding agreement. Issues and conflicts are handled in a straightforward manner and routinely engages the organization. So that gets back to, if you guys are running national and multinational organizations, how are you engaging? How are you communicating? How are you reaching out to stakeholders to gather input and feedback and have two-way dialogue instead of just pushing the top down, top down, top down all of the time? And if we've got time at the end, I'd love to explore that a little bit with you and just hear your ideas for what you're doing with that. So also the fifth is a vibrant and interdependent biodiversity. Are you enabling adaptation? So what are you doing to enable change and differences? Do you have a healthy leadership team? Are there divergent perspectives? And is there structure in your team meetings? So respect, value, and trust are all super essential. Um, Divergent perspectives. I didn't make a slide on this, but I'm gonna camp out on this for just a second because I think I was talking with one of you at the conference or somebody else mentioned this to me fairly recently that neurodivergence is a really critical element of the makeup of our organizations now, and even more so going into the future. So about 20% of the workforce now is neurodivergent, and they're saying that that number will climb to 50% in the next few years with Gen Z. So being able to adapt, listen, help them have a great experience. They tend to leave organizations and not stick because they don't feel like they can fit in. So are we making accommodations that are respectful to folks who come in and maybe think and act a little bit differently than we all do? That's super important as we go forward. It's always been important, but super important. So back to Lencioni. In his work called The Ideal Team Player, if any of you are hiring and or on the lookout or promoting, there's kind of this Venn diagram which looks at three aspects, and it's easy to find one of the three. It's you can find two of the three, but finding somebody that has all of the three can be a little bit challenging. So those three elements are the humble leader. So they lack an excessive ego or concerns about status. Humble people, quick to point out contributions of others, slow to seek attention, share credit, emphasize team over self, and define success collectively rather than individually. Your hungry team leader, always looking for more things to do, more to learn, more responsibility to take on. Hungry people almost never have to be pushed by a manager to work harder because they are motivated by self and they are constantly thinking about the next step and the next opportunity for them. And the smart folks, they have common sense about people. So it's not just, book smarts, it's common sense smarts as well. The smart people tend to know what is happening in a group situation. They know how to deal with others in an effective way, and they have a good judgment and intuition around the subtleties of group dynamics and the impact of their words and actions. So when you put this diagram together, we all know that an overused skill or a skill used to excess can then become a detriment, and an underused skill needs to be developed. So how do we kind of find that balance? So looking at this Venn diagram here that Lencioni has made for us, the humble person, if left to their own devices, could become just a pawn in the organization. If they're kind of spilling over into the hungry area, they can be an accidental mess maker. They can also kind of be a lovable slacker. So if we look at the hungry and smart, you can get a skillful politician who is kind of ladder climbing and has a little bit of an agenda to them. So the smart person can sometimes be seen as the charmer, just because he or she has that intuitive sense, that sixth sense of how to understand people and understand how to navigate organizations. So if you can find that right balance of humble, hungry, and smart, bring that person onto your team right away. And there's a lot more study about this that I'm happy to share with you if you're interested. So servant leaders also look like, I'm throwing this up just because it's kind of fun. This is my dad. Um, so my dad was known as the cowboy. His handle was Matt Dillon. And everybody has a hobby, right? My dad's hobby was something called the Single Action Shooting Society, where they would go and dress up as Gunsmoke characters and ride horses and shoot at balloons and things and win competitions. So that's what my dad did for fun. But on the other side of his life, he was quietly consistent. For 48 years, he served as the Van Buren County Surveyor up in Michigan, and was a member of the Sheriff's Mounted Division. And that man, every day, without fail, went into the work office. He was there by 7, 8 in the morning, worked all day or was out in the field surveying, and came home, never missed a day. With the mounted division, they would do a lot of safety patrols at large events like fireworks and parades and things, over at Lake Michigan, that would have him getting out at, 1, 2 in the morning. And he would still be back up and back at work the next morning. So just quietly consistent serving his county, serving his community in a very, very consistent manner. And sadly, we lost him in 2020 due to some colon cancer. So, but it's a great picture. So I just wanted to have a little fun with you guys and share that, hobbies can be all kinds of things, and this is what he did for fun. So your take-home nuggets for this section are you being a big kid and having any fun? Are you living for today or just slaving away working another day? Are you accepting of others, and are you forgiving and loving of others? And do you have a plan to die with your boots on? I still remember, this probably goes back maybe 4 or 5 years before my father passed. My brother was visiting. Roger lives on the side of a mountain in Colorado. So a very, very different life experience than what I have. He just got back from climbing some mountains in Tibet, and just, living his best life. But I remember we were sitting at the kitchen table with my dad, and he was probably in his late 70s at the time. And we asked the question, we asked that R word question. Dad, are you thinking about slowing down or retiring? And it was the shot that could be heard around the world. His face fell and he got very animated, pounded his fists on the table, and said, "Retire? What in the world would I want to do that for? I'm having the time of my life and I love what I do." So his plan was to die with his boots on, and he did. So that is his life of service. And I'm going to ask you if you are living your life of service. So, how do you lead in the community? It's not just all internal within your organization. And I'm just sharing with you a couple of examples of things that I've been involved with the Chick-fil-A stores here in Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. Up on the left is a Child Hope International. This is a really great organization that provides, what you see there is our big bovine cow and some helpers are packing high protein meals. So those have protein powder, vegetables, rice, other nutrients packed in this pack that can be shipped to third world countries where there are starving kids in need. And they just add some water, and then they've got a high protein meal pack there. So we have served with a Child Hope International for 14 years. And then also they do a program locally that they started called Hope Sacks. And what that is for students who might receive breakfast or lunch at school, but when they get home, there's nothing there to eat. And mostly there's nothing there to eat on the weekends. So these hope sacks, the students are identified, and these hope sacks are prepared and given out to the students on like a Thursday afternoon or a Friday. And then they have food for the weekend, hopefully some fresh fruit, apples, bananas, things like that, applesauce packs, crackers, mac and cheese, different things that are easy, even if there's not a parent around that can help prepare, that they can probably manage to prepare themselves. And so A Child's Hope has been pouring into the local community, started with one school 4 years ago, and now we're up to four schools helping them with this program, and we hope to add more. And then a fun thing that we do every year is the Reds opening day. If you're not a Cincinnati person, if you don't know, you don't know, but it's pretty much a holiday here. So opening day, the Red Stockings, are the oldest baseball team in the country. And MLB has promised that we will always have an opening day home game right here in Cincinnati. And so there's always a big parade downtown. This year, I would say the police estimates are 300,000 people gathered downtown to celebrate the opening day. So we take our big bovine friends down and have a float and some music and just have a really good time kind of celebrating Cincinnati. So take home nuggets for this section. How are you showing up? And I put in there kind of, are you showing up for more than half a day? I used to work with a guy when I lived in Pennsylvania. I would work for an insurer, and he came from MetLife in New York. And I was so excited when I got the job because they said, our work day is like 8 to 4:30. I was like, oh man, I get to get out of work at 4:30 and like have an afternoon to myself. And I learned something. I learned that you never leave before your boss leaves. Because then, if you do, you're walking by his office and he looks at you and he says, what, Pam? Half a day? Now, I think he was joking, but I couldn't be sure. So, how are you showing up and what are you investing in? And are you doing your best? And yeah, I didn't really ever leave until after 5 for that particular job. So, how are you serving your community? Is there an organization like a Child's Hope International or other? And I'm sure with all of your organizations, you've got different missions and different serving opportunities in the community and internationally where you guys all serve. And how are you being a role model for others? Are there gaps in the community where you can help, where you haven't been helping? We're doing, I think I mentioned to Ginny that we're doing some leadership work with my church right now. And one of the task forces is looking at what are we doing in the community? What do we need to do? There was some research done for a 5 to 7 mile radius around where our campus is, and what are the needs in that community? How can we help step up and serve them and make a difference locally, hyper locally? And are you making service fun? Back to the big bovines I get to hang out with, they certainly make service a lot of fun. And it's a joy and a pleasure when I get to take one of them out with me for an outing. And then what's your legacy and what is your imprint? What are you looking to leave behind after you're either not here or not in your current position? So let's talk a little bit about leading through understanding and communication. So as you're leading, are you listening to understand and listening with empathy? Those are two really important things. So you're not just, again, are we one way communication, dumping the truck of information that we feel we have to get out? Or are we opening up that dialogue and two-way communication for listening, understanding, and empathy? And are we serving through just being present? Clarity counts. There's a phrase that some of my clients are using, and I'm not sure I like it, but I think I get it. It says, clear is kind. And I'm like, oh, that kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But I guess it's true that the clearer we are with what needs to be said, ultimately it results in kindness because we're cutting through a lot of clutter and a lot of stuff, and just getting down to the brass tacks of where do we need to be? Is there a change that needs to be made? How do we need to go about doing this? And what is the benefit to our organizations for doing that? So the clear is kind, clarity counts. And then appreciating the differences. We talked a little bit about, me having some invisible disabilities and physical differences and the neurodivergent folks. And I guess I'm in that category too because I fit ADHD and I also fit dyslexia. So I'm special. There's a lot going on with me. So connection is the key. This is my friend Gladys, and some of our little camper friends. We do some lunches for an inner city camp at Ziegler Park in downtown Cincinnati. And Gladys is their camp director, and I've had the pleasure of serving with Gladys for probably 4 or 5 years now. Um, and she truly leads with compassion and kindness, which is needed more than ever. We see that that's really lacking in today's environments, and that loneliness is an epidemic. So, anything we can do to break down barriers, bring people together, and make every encounter special is super important. So, how can you help be the change, improve your social emotional intelligence, take time to invest and make connections with others, and then create a team that dazzles? And I use the dazzle because a zebra herd is actually called a dazzle. So back to the Ehlers-Danlos, the rare invisible disease that nobody really knows that I have. Um, Together, everyone is different, everyone is unique, but we're coming together through our differences to be strengths. And the zebras need to be part of a herd and they need to form a dazzle together, which I think is a great metaphor for forming a great team. So it says right there, why can't you ride a zebra? Because they're stubborn as you know what, stubborn as mules, and they kick and they bite, and they're really not that friendly. But when you put them in a herd, that's when everything changes and their outlook and their behaviors change, all for the better. So, your leadership imprint, I like to look at this in terms of meeting people where they are, adapting your approach to helping others succeed, and then just watch the beauty that unfolds when you do that. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions, so I'll open it up for questions and see if there's any comments or feedback from the different sections that I've shared with you today.
This was outstanding, Pam. Thank you so much. But yeah, definitely if Dr. Horn or Andres has some questions or anyone else, please, this is for you.
Pam, I have a question. If you had to think of like one thing to start your 60 minutes, as you said, the first 60 minutes of the day, last 60 minutes, what are some things that we can kind of build into that first 60 minutes to help us get off started on the right foot? Any suggestions?
Put your phone down. To look at the phone. I start my day with prayer and meditation. Um, there's there's actually a TV video program that I like, and so I will turn that on and tune into that, which helps me think of my spiritual well-being and what I need to do to get closer to God. And usually there's some great nuggets in there that help me with my day. So if I can take the time to do that before I dive into looking at the phone and the emails and all the busyness of the day, that helps me get in the right framework. And then at the end of the day, looking at your, they always say, don't, you can have a list of 20 things. I joke, I say, this hasn't risen to my top 20 list yet, something that needs to be addressed, but it's not quite there yet. But what are your top three? So as you're closing and wrapping up your last 60, what are the top three? And is it deep thinking time? Is it strategic time that you need? Or is it check the box, get a task done type of a thing? And are you baking in that think time, that quality time in the day? So we all have different times of day where we're kind of slumpy and need the coffee, or it's not for us. And times when we're in a high performance mode and it's really good. So schedule, if you can, your workday around when you need to be more task oriented and check the box or do your meetings, and when you need that deep strategic thinking time.
Thank you. Um, and then another question. You had talked a little bit about like the signs of a dysfunctional team, and
Yes,
many many of us
Welcome
have
to my world. Did I say that out loud?
many of us have had the pleasure of
yes,
being part of a dysfunctional team. Um,
yes,
do you have any, when you're forming your own team, you can make steps to prevent that. But sometimes we're part of a team and we have to be part of that team no matter how dysfunctional they are. What
yes.
might we be able to do internally to help make it not so dysfunctional or maybe on the way to functional? Is that possible?
Whack 'em upside the head. And I will send this out to you guys. I didn't get there due to time. I've got 9 symptoms of a dysfunctional workplace. So I'll send this list to
Please.
you all.
Jenny,
And
send it to Jenny and then she'll send
uh-huh.
it to us.
Fantastic. So I work a lot with organizational development and helping teams get stronger and better and play nicer together, if you will. So if that's something you'd either like me to touch on in another webinar or speak with your groups individually, I would be glad to do that. I go back, I'm flipping through my slides here, y'all. Sorry about the watch your eyes. I'm going back to this Oz principle. And again, it might be a little weird to get your head around, but it goes into the details. And I use this model in training a lot um, of what is considered acceptable above the line and below the line behavior. They call it above the line and below the line. So you need leaders, and that doesn't mean necessarily the top dog on the organizational chart, but it can be individual accountable leaders who are willing to operate above the line with ownership, accountability, and responsibility, and to not give way. And these are strong forces. I'm sure y'all have been in a lot of different organizations where the strong forces, the negative forces want to pull you, right? Or they're the ones blaming somebody else or making the excuse or saying, not my fault, I didn't do this, blah, 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 right? So having consistent leadership that allows the desired outcomes that you want. So are you able to stay above the line, and are you able to, and it takes some constitutional fortitude, can we just say that, to not allow the below the line behavior in an organization. And that takes work. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes trust, and it takes not allowing the below the line behavior to continue. So it needs to be nipped, it needs to be called out. And once your other team members see it being called out and not acceptable anymore, you're going to move more people up to that above the line behavior. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thanks.
It's the easy stuff that we do, right?
You're right.
Yes. So there's a whole body of work um, related to that and related to there's like some sort cards, and I've got a lot of different tools and resources to help identify um, how to help your organization move forward if you're in a really unhealthy place and what needs to happen. And, and sometimes we have the opportunity to change out players and sometimes we don't, right? So, how can you build some trust, build a relationship, and consist? And to it, Kathy has a phrase of consistent pressure relentlessly applied. So if you are consistently applying the right positive pressure relentlessly, you're going to see some of the changes that you're looking for. And organizational development is tricky, as you guys all know. You've worked in teams and you've been leaders of teams and leaders of organizations. So it's a challenging area to work in for sure.
Jenny, I think we should probably wrap it up since it is on the 1 hour mark. Pam, thank you so much for your insights, for your knowledge, and really for your heart. I mean, that's the most important thing, as I can tell you really gave us your heart and soul with such wise words. My name is Brett Pomerantz. I want to thank you, everyone for joining us for this month's Religion Communicators Council webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.